This is the video you've all been waiting for. It answers the question, what are the four horsemen of the apocalypse? But it's about a lot more than that. The four horsemen are an extremely interesting image, but they are fairly minor players in the drama that is the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. I've heard a lot of sermons about the first and the last chapters of Revelation, but not too many about the middle ones. And I suspect that when people are doing their daily Bible reading plans, they can get as bogged down in these middle chapters of Revelation as they do in the book of Leviticus. This part of Revelation is hard because the images are confusing. We don't know what's going on like the original audience did. We don't understand the genre or get all the allusions and the symbols. The middle chapters of Revelation can also be emotionally difficult. They are not always pleasant. They deal with some heavy stuff, but they also help us to understand the heavy stuff that we experience in life. And regarding the emotional toll exacted by these chapters, I have one piece of advice. Remember the vision from chapter 4 and 5. Chapters 4 and 5 are the lenses through which we should read the whole book of Revelation, and they make the hard stuff not quite so hard. When you understand this book, trust me, you are going to be blessed by the revelation of Jesus Christ. In this video, we will be dealing with the interpretation of symbols and images in Revelation 6 and the first few verses of chapter 8. Before we get into the 7 seals vision, let's do a quick review of chapters 4 and 5. In the vision that Jesus shows John, there is an open door to heaven. The door to heaven is open, and that's good news. And there's a throne, and someone is seated on the throne. This tells us that even though it doesn't always seem like it, someone is in charge. And that someone is the Almighty Creator of the universe. There has never been, nor will there ever be, another occupant of the throne. The living God is in control of everything. God holds in his hand a scroll. It is the scroll of history. It contains the plan by which God will fulfill his purpose for all of creation. It's the plan for bringing the kingdom of heaven down to earth. The scroll has 7 seals, and John finds out that there's only one person who can break the seals and bring about the secret plan contained therein. The Lion of Judah. So John turns to see this all-powerful lion, and lo and behold, it's a little lamb. And it looks as if it has been slain. It turns out that the lion can only open the scroll because it has become the slaughtered lamb. Jesus can open the scroll because he has taken the sins of the world and the consequences onto himself. He is worthy because he was slain. This slain lamb is on the throne, in the center of the Almighty, in the center of all things. Wow, that's good news. But from our perspective, it just doesn't seem like it's true. I teach history, and the last 2,000 years don't look like anyone is in control. And I look at what's happened in the last year, or even the last week, and it looks like chaos. As John shows us, things are not really as they seem. In these chapters 6 and the first part of 8, Jesus breaks the seals of the scroll and puts into effect the secret plan of history. As each seal is broken, we get a whole new view of the flow of history. There are 7 seals on the scroll of history. These seals are not there to prevent us from seeing what's inside. That's not what seals are for. Seals indicate ownership. It indicates who is authorized to open it. So it's not so much a lock as it is a mailing address on a letter. It's just a lot more official. In the case of this scroll, Jesus is the only one who can open it. It's meant for him and he for it. He is authorized because he was slain. Think about that for a moment. He couldn't open it before. He was there from the beginning, and all things were created by him and through him, but the purpose of creation could not be fulfilled until he was born of a woman and went to the cross. Starting in Revelation 6, Jesus breaks the seals one at a time. And it is not until the 7th seal is broken that we come to understand the point of it all. And the point of it all is this. There are all sorts of reasons for the changes and upheavals and revolutions of history. And one of the biggest reasons is the prayers of those who follow the Lamb. You will notice that each of these scenes in which one of the seals is broken, someone offers a prayer. In the first 4 scenes, it's one of the 4 living creatures. Each cries out, "Come." They are talking to the Lamb. As representatives of all living things, they are asking the Lamb to come. They are praying for the fulfillment of creation. So come is a prayer. The prayer at the opening of the fifth seal is from the disciples who gave up their lives for the gospel. They cry out, "How long, O Lord?" With the sixth seal, the prayer is offered up by the unbelievers. They pray not to God, but to the mountains and rocks. Their prayer is, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb." And then, at the breaking of the seventh seal, there is silence in heaven for about half an hour, and the prayers of all God's people ascend to go up before God. Darrell Johnson says that history is moved by many forces, and one of them is the prayers of God's people. Now, we aren't praying for wars and pestilence and turmoil, of course. We are praying, "Thy kingdom come." And when we pray that, things start to happen. The kingdom of heaven starts to break into the world, and it pulls down idols, it roots out evil, and it turns things upside down. This looks like turmoil, and it is. And it's a dangerous place to be. And this is where we are. This vision encompasses the entire cosmos. We know this because John uses the number 4. It's the number of the cosmos. The 4 living creatures represent the whole of everything that lives, and the 4 winds and the 4 corners represent everything else. We also have the 4 horsemen. 4 means it's on a cosmic scale. The opening of each of the first 4 seals releases one of what are often referred to as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So what are these horsemen, and why do they come? The 4 horsemen represent the kinds of things that can happen and will happen when the kingdom of the Lamb starts to break into the world. Jesus doesn't cause the misery and terror, but when Jesus and his kingdom come, the powers of the world don't like it. They oppose and resist it, and this results in the misery and terror. So let's look at the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. And then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror bent on conquest. The first horseman rides a white horse. He holds a bow and wears a crown. He's a conqueror. Some have suggested that this horseman is Jesus because Jesus rides a white horse and wears a crown later in chapter 19. And they figure that this rider represents Christ's first steps in a gradual conquest of the world before he gets more serious later on. Darrell Johnson gives 2 reasons why this first rider probably isn't Jesus. First, the language of conquest and revelation is always associated with the forces of evil. And second, all 4 horsemen are likely connected in John's mind to the 4 horns that we read about in Zechariah 1. And these horns are all of the same character. There isn't one good one and 3 bad. They all 4 together scatter Judah, and that's not a good thing. These are the horns that scattered Judah, so that no one could raise their head. But the craftsmen have come to terrify them and throw down these horns of the nations who lift up their horns against the land of Judah to scatter the people. The first horseman isn't Jesus, but it is meant to look like Jesus. This horseman of darkness is masquerading as light. It's opposed to the kingdom, and it seeks to conquer human minds. You will notice that the crown he wears was given to him. Like all rulers of the earth, he rules with permission from a higher authority. Evil is not on the throne. It's on a leash, and its position somehow serves God's purpose. We will get into how it does this later on. Of the second horseman we read, "When the Lamb opened the seal, I heard the second living creature say, 'Come.' Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword." The second seal releases a red horse with its rider. This one has been given a sword. This rider too is on a leash. It has been given permission to wage war. Red is the symbol of blood and passion and violence. As evil resists the kingdom of the Lamb, it churns up all sorts of hatreds and civil strife and war. There's a great spiritual war going on beneath the temporal conflicts in our personal lives and between the peoples and nations of the world. One or both sides has rejected the way of Jesus. It's too weak, they say. Yeah, it looks like that, but things are not always as they seem. Of the third horseman we read, "When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the living creature say, 'Come.' I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the four living creatures saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. With war and strife comes all kinds of hardship. Food and other essential resources are in short supply. The pair of scales are all about the fact that there's not enough food to go around. It needs to be rationed. 2 pounds of wheat is how much food is needed for a day, and it costs a day's wages. Prices for the necessities are way up. But the rich will be okay. The oil and the wine are not damaged. Nice for them. For now. And of the fourth horseman we read, when the Lamb opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, Come. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. This rider is the only one with a name, Death, and Hades, or the grave, follows close behind. The 4 seals and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are here to show us that ever since the Lamb ascended to the throne, the forces of evil have been in conflict with his kingdom. And that's pretty much what the last 2,000 years has looked like, right? The list of things that illustrate this is really long, so I'll just show you the last 25 years of conflicts that illustrate for us the clash of the kingdoms. The Lamb is on the throne. Wait, all this is Jesus doing? No, Jesus has taken the throne, and there are forces that don't like that. And they want to be in charge, so they resist. Creation cries out, Come! And Jesus is coming. Even though these horsemen are trampling all over the place, this is not going to last. And notice that these passages don't say, I will come. No, they say, I am coming. He is on his way, even now. The first 4 seals basically show that because of the forces that will not go the way of the Lamb, there will be conquest, violence, injustice, and death. And the church is not going to be spared from the results of all this conflict. From the 4 seals, from the 4 horsemen. Then regarding the opening of the 5th seal, we read this. When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God, and the testimony they had maintained. They called out in a loud voice, How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood? Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer, until the full number of their fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been. At the opening of the 5th seal, John sees the souls of those who had been killed because of their witness to the Lamb, and they are underneath the altar. They are there because that's where the blood goes when one slaughters an animal for sacrifice. This shows that the death of Jesus' followers has a priestly function. It is a sacrificial act that has sacrificial consequences for the world. And the martyrs ask, How long, O Lord, will this go on? They are crying for God's perfect justice to put an end to all the violence and injustice in the world. God's answer to them is his answer to us, because we have the same question, right? God says, My way is not the way of the lion, but the way of the lamb. He says that they need to wait a little longer while more Christians are killed. And that might be the place where a lot of people close this book and go read Psalm 23 or something a lot more comforting. But here's what's going on behind the scenes. Back in the day, the people of God were waiting for the coming of the Messiah and the day of the Lord. This is when they believed that God was going to establish his kingdom on earth. And they expected that there would be a time of suffering as the kingdoms clashed. They believed that this event was inevitable, and it had a fixed amount of time. John here is working with this idea, that there's a fixed number of martyrs, and when that number is reached, then God will bring in his justice. The idea is to look at the suffering as a part of a bigger picture, and that bigger picture shows us that the suffering of the faithful has meaning. And then the 6th seal is opened. I watched as he opened the 6th seal, and there was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth made of goat hair, and the moon turned blood red. And the stars in the sky fell to earth as figs drop from a fig tree when shaken by a strong wind. The heavens receded like a scroll being rolled up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?" John has to use similes again to describe what can't be described. There's an earthquake, but it's more than an earthquake. The great shaking he describes here is cosmic. We've seen things like this before in the Old Testament. It usually portrays some kind of massive crisis. And what's really important for us to see here is that all this havoc comes not from God firing thunderbolts from heaven onto the earth. All this turmoil comes from within the earth, from within creation itself. What's happening here is that God is simply taking his hand off the universe for just a moment and just a little way, and this is the effect. We take the constancy and stability of the cosmos for granted, and we forget that God sustains everything that is. Since the fall, we told God that we want to do it our way. So here we have God saying to us, "Okay, fine, have it your way. You get to be in control." And of course, we can't even begin to do that, and it all falls apart on us. The wrath of God is not him pounding on us. It's simply letting us have our way. The sixth seal brings us right up to the edge, right up to the brink of history. And we expect the seventh seal to be this final climactic coming of the kingdom. And it's not. This is what we read. "When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour." What the heck? We expect this big climax, and instead we get silence. Some suggest that this is a dramatic pause before the action continues. Others say that this silence is a return to the silence at the moment of creation. Still others point to another apocalyptic story that was making the rounds in John's day. This story involved the world returning to the primeval silence. But the silence can be explained by the context of this vision. Here's the whole passage of the breaking of the seventh seal from Revelation 8. "When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and the seven trumpets were given to them. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of God's people, went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake." In this vision, God receives the prayers of his people. There was a rabbinical document around in John's day that said that the angels sing praises to God all night. But during the day, they are silent so that God can attend to the prayers of his people. That's a beautiful idea. The 30 minutes of silence is God listening to the prayers of his people. I sometimes wonder if there's any point to my prayers. God's going to do what he's going to do, and he gives people free will to do what they want to do, and he doesn't usually override their choices. So I ask myself, what's the point in asking God to do something when his plan and free choice seem to dictate what's going to happen? Well, things aren't as they seem. In this vision, it seems pretty clear that the prayers of God's people are part of the coming of his kingdom. Now, how all this works is a mystery, but those prayers have an impact when they are hurled at the earth. So when we pray, "Thy kingdom come," it is part of the coming of the kingdom. And in this, I am reminded that I should take my prayers more seriously. Johnson concludes with this idea. The Lamb is on the throne, and because he is, the most revolutionary thing that we can do is to join creation in crying out, "Come," and then choose to stand with the Lamb and absorb the suffering that comes when his kingdom collides with all that is not holy or true. Now, you may have noticed that in our discussion about the seven seals, we entirely skipped over chapter 7. Chapter 6 ends with the sixth seal, and chapter 8 starts with the seventh. In the next video, we will look at what John sees between the opening of the last two seals. Thank you, and we'll see you there.